Hey everyone, it's Snowflarky bringing you my Legendary Ocean deck profile. This is another one of my longtime favorite casual slash for fun, just pick up and play decks, and always does pretty well. I'm a big fan of the ocean reducing the levels of water monsters, allowing you to just freely normal summon larger water monsters, and deck does pretty solid in a casual environment because legendary ocean decks have the ability to play lots of stun and anti-meta cards that can really give a lot of other decks a hard time, and that often can win a game, especially in a casual setting where the decks already are not as powerful. So I hope you'll enjoy it. With that, let's get through the card by card. Starting off with our monsters, I am playing 3 copies of the legendary Fisherman 2. This is a 5-star monster with 2,200 attack, one of the many large beat sticks we'll be playing in this deck. When Legendary Ocean is on the field, all water monsters in your hand and on the field lose 1 level. So this 5-star Fisherman becomes a 4-star, allowing you to normal summon it with ease. And of course, when this card's on the field, its name becomes Legendary Fisherman. That's pretty important with the interaction with level 3, which I'll show in a second. And of course, while Umi is on the field, and important to note for Legendary Ocean players is that Legendary Ocean always counts as Umi. Very interesting card interaction there. But while Umi is on the field, this card is unaffected by the effect of effect monsters. So lots of powerful effect monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh, of course. And being able to be unaffected by those effects is a pretty nice benefit to have. And then, of course, if this card is destroyed by battle or removed from the field because of an opponent's card effect while it is in its owner's control, we are able to search a level 7 water monster from the deck and add it to our hand. Which is why we have our main target, the one of Legendary Fisherman 3. This is one of my favorite boss monsters in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Great addition, great way to boost really cool old Duel Monsters era card. You can only special summon it by tributing a Legendary Fisherman on your side of the field. When you special summon it, you can banish all monsters your opponent control. That's excellent. Non-targeting, non-destruction, banish removal. We like to see that. This card can't be destroyed by battle or card effects, and it is unaffected by the effects of spell and trap cards. So pretty resilient monster that's hard to deal with. You need some kind of targeting non-destruction monster effect in order to remove it. Definitely limits how an opponent can interact and play with it. And of course, you have the ability to return all banished cards your opponent controls to the graveyard for the next battle damage you deal to be doubled. That gives you a lot of additional damage, which can help push for game, close out a game. Legendary Fisherman 3, pretty nasty card to deal with. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Lapis Dragon. This is a really cool tuner to play in the deck. Has a nice effect where if this card is added from the deck to your hand, you can reveal it and then special summon it. That includes drawing it, even for turn. So it gives you a free body on board, less punishing if you don't have your Legendary Ocean yet. And of course, given that it's a tuner, it will allow us to make synchro plays that you'll see when we get to the extra deck. But also, just being a 5-star water monster is pretty beneficial because we'll be able to use it with Sea Stealth attack, and that is pretty sick. Next up, I'm playing 1 copy of Newman Rat Testudo. This is just a one-of cool little stun monster. It states that neither player can special summon monsters with 1800 or less attack. That can put a halt to a lot of early combo starters that may be low attack power monsters. You just summon Newman Rat Testudo, certain matchups, that will kind of be an end game if they can't do anything about it, and you got lots of ways to protect a card like this. So it becomes quite a pain to deal with. Very nice addition to have. Next, we are playing two vanilla monsters, one Terra King Salmon and one Giga Gaga Gigo. These are in here just for their large attack stats, their level 5 water trait, and also an important part of the deck is that they are different types, which comes into play later. We are playing lots of monsters of different types, and I've decided to build this deck kind of around benefiting that. And last up in our monsters, we are playing 3 copies of Warrior of Atlantis. This is a 1900 attack 4-star monster that you can essentially discard from your hand to the graveyard to add a Legendary Ocean. Legendary Ocean is the card that makes everything work, so we definitely want to see it. So we are going to play 3 Warrior of Atlantis to get it. Either get the Legendary Ocean, or Warrior of Atlantis can be just an additional body to summon on board after Ocean is set up. And that is it for our monster count. Next up, looking at our spell cards, I am playing 2 copies of a Legendary Ocean. We have quite a number of ways to search this card, so I've decided to only run 2 Legendary Ocean. Once we have one on the field, it's pretty easily able to be protected and even brought back from the graveyard. So having 3 just oftentimes is too much because all the other Legendary Oceans I will get are dead cards, and in a deck like this, it's fairly fragile. You want to make sure every card that you're seeing is pretty powerful. So just playing 2 of the Legendary Ocean, this makes everything work. It's always treated as Umi. You downgrade all water monsters in both players' hands and on the field by 1 level, turning all your 5 stars into 4 stars in this build. And of course, they'll all gain 200 attack and defense. Pretty good field spell, makes everything run, and there's lots of cards that interact with it, so we want to see it. With that, we're also playing 1 Terraforming. We want to see Legendary Ocean, so I'm playing Terraforming. Next up, to search one of our 2 vanillas, I am playing 1 copy of Summoner's Art, a 1-to-2 ratio. I've always adjusted this in certain builds. Sometimes I've been more in on the vanillas and played more Summoner's Art for just a lower monster count. So, you know, you can always adjust that, whatever feels better. Sometimes it feels better, sometimes it doesn't. So, Summoner's Art in there to search the vanillas. Next, I am playing 1 copy of Fury of Karyushin. This card allows you to add a Torrential Tribute from your deck to your hand, which is pretty cool. And then if a water monster or monsters you control would be destroyed by card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard, and you can prevent those from being destroyed. Now you can only use Fury of the Karyushin once per turn. So we are going to be playing triple Torrential Tribute in this deck. Lots of great synergies with the water deck. But unfortunately, you know, Fury can be dead in the hand if all the Torrentials are already grabbed, so sometimes having 2 is a little too much. And honestly, with the second effect of protecting from destruction doesn't come into play too often, just because of a more common interaction way of keeping our monsters safe. But I still like 1. Sometimes 2 feels good. Oftentimes, I'm changing my ratios a bit on this deck to adapt to however everyone else is playing and what they're playing at any given time. Next for our spells, I am playing 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. This deck is very much built like a stun deck. The extra deck you can go into for some synchro plays, but it's not as powerful as a lot of standard decks as far as big extra deck payoffs. So I like to turn that into card advantage instead to find some of our powerful floodgates, dig further for a Legendary Ocean, just a number of uses turning the extra deck into card advantage. And also to boost consistency, find a crucial card, I am playing 3 copies of Pot of Duality. Excavate the top 3 from your deck, add 1 to your hand, shuffle the rest back in. You can't special summon the turn you use it. It isn't drawing, so it doesn't conflict with Extravagance at all, and there's a lot of turns where you'll just be normal summoning a monster and nothing more to that, since it's a very trap heavy deck. So we are glad to have Duality for the consistency boost. And that is it for our spell lineup. Next, we are moving on to trap cards, and we're going to start off with 3 of Sea Stealth Attack. This card is the powerhouse of a Legendary Ocean deck. It is the win con. It is just a fantastic card that has made me just love Umi decks overall. Um, so when you activate this card, you can activate an Umi from your hand or graveyard. That gives you a way to bring back a destroyed Legendary Ocean, because Legendary Ocean is always Umi. And then, of course, while Umi is face up on the field, you can activate the below card effects once per turn. You can banish a water monster you control until the end phase of this turn, and face up spell and trap cards you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, even if this card leaves the field. So that is kind of this kind of allows you to facilitate the powerful ability to play lots of floodgates, continuous spell and trap cards that can hinder your opponent and then are hard to remove because they are not able to be destroyed. Um, so, decks already oftentimes can have limited answers to cards that are stopping them from playing, and this gives a protection from a lot of the common ways of removing that, and oftentimes it will be your main force of winning a game. Additionally, this card has another effect that at the start of the damage step, if your water monster whose original level is 5 or higher battles an opponent's monster, you can destroy that monster. So non-targeting form of removal. It is destruction, which doesn't make it as good if it wasn't destruction. But it's a non-targeting form of removal. Turns all your level 5s, even Lapis Dragon, into annoyances to get over in battle. And even let you attack with those lower monsters like that. So it can be quite obnoxious to deal with. Overall, really powerful card, powerful effects. Glad to have it at 3. It's at 3 because we want to see it. Next up, starting our line of really powerful floodgates that are often the win con of this deck. We are playing There Can Only Be One. This card makes it so that each player can only control one monster of each type. So if your opponent's playing a deck that has a lot of the same types, a lot of decks are like that, they really can't summon a whole bunch of monsters. And in this deck, we're not necessarily as punished by it. We got Legendary Fisherman 2, who was a warrior monster, Lapis Dragon, which was a sea serpent, Numenera Testudo was aqua, Giga Gaga Gigo is a reptile, Terra King Salmon is a fish, and even Warrior of Atlantis is an aqua. So all sorts of different types are available for the Legendary Ocean deck. So I'm going all in on that so that I can play There Can Only Be One and stop a lot of opponents. Next up, I'm playing a Macrocosmos. Even though there's a search effect off Legendary Fisherman 2 for going to the graveyard, it's not that important, and Macrocosmos is just a game-winning card against so many matchups that I would be foolish not to play it, especially since I can protect it from destruction with Sea Stealth Attack. A lot of people need their graveyard. Macrocosmos says nope, everything's banished instead, and that can halt a lot of matchups on the spot. Sometimes this is a third, There Can Only Be One, but in order to diversify the floodgates for different matchups, I am playing a copy of Goes and Match. The ratios of this can always be adjusted with There Can Only Be One. And of course you can build the deck differently if you wanted to not play There Can Only Be One and go on Goes and Match. But Goes and Match just says that each player can only control a monster of one attribute. Everything is water in this deck. Most things you'll go into in the extra deck are water. So play Goes and Match, get a benefit off of shutting down decks that rely on multiple attributes. Next up, Skill Drain. Most monsters in here are just a large body that will destroy monsters via Sea Stealth Attack's effect. So you can probably afford to turn off your on-field effects in order to hinder your opponents. Very powerful card, stops monster effects while they're on the field, and that can stop a lot of decks just right in their tracks, turn off a lot of win cons that a lot of decks have. Skill Drain is a win con, so we are playing it. So after the Floodgates, I am playing 3 copies of Torrential Tribute. Torrential Tribute is a trap card that even in a modern Yu-Gi-Oh sense, I'm still a big fan of. If you go first, you can torrential tribute, interrupt an opponent's play, and even if you go second, you can bait out a negate, but after on their following turn, after you've set torrential tribute, and then find a good moment to surprise tribute, interrupt a board, especially in casual games like this. Um, So very awesome card. We can of course search it with Fury of Karyushin, and oftentimes we can protect our own board either with the Fury of Karyushin banish effect or by using Sea Stealth Attack to banish a key water monster for the turn, and then it will come back at the end phase. And in exchange, we get to interrupt an opponent's, mass swarm of summons. Pretty good card. Just for my matchups, I go against a lot of back row heavy decks at the casual duel night. So I'm playing 2 copies of Heavy Storm Duster. Target up to 2 spawn traps on the field, destroy them in exchange for your battle phase. That doesn't matter when you play it on an opponent's turn, and that gets you a +1. And then last, I am playing 2 copies of Storming Mirror Force. A bit risky because it can get popped, but it's a non-targeting, non-destruction removal trap that if I'm getting attacked by a wave of monsters, can bounce them all back to the hand. It's pretty good. Doesn't always go off, but sometimes you get to play with that risk when you're playing a lower power level deck like this. And that's it for our main deck. Going into our extra deck monsters, before we really start, it should be noted that the way this deck is built and plays, you don't go into the extra deck a ton. I built it more as a traditional stun deck just because it doesn't have the swarming capability to do a really big board builder like a lot of modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks do. But we still have a selection of things so that we can bring them out when it is fitting. Starting with 2 copies of White Aura Whale. Usually if I'm going into anything in the extra deck, it's this card. White Aura Whale is a very awesome water boss monster to have. It requires a water tuner and 1 or more water non-tuner monsters. Everything's water in this deck, so that's no problem. And of course, when you synchro summon this card, you can destroy all your opponent's attack position monsters. So that's pretty cool. Non-targeting board wipe. We like that. And then this card can make up to 2 attacks on monsters during each battle phase. Pretty good. Any leftover monsters, you can clear them. Especially if there were defense position monsters that were not left over. And when you attack those defense position monsters, you inflict piercing battle damage. So you're even going to get battle damage for attacking defense position monsters. And of course, what makes this card really good is this kind of self-return revival effect it has at the end. When this card is destroyed by an opponent's card, either by battle or card effect, you can banish a water monster from your graveyard, and if you do, special summon this card back, and it is treated as a tuner. So, you get White Aura Whale back. Important to note, this is a water monster whose original level is 5 or higher. So you will be destroying monsters by the effect of Sea Stealth Attack, so you're not always getting the piercing off. But that, that keeps this card alive, keeps it on the field, makes it hard to deal with, and a pretty powerful water payoff. I only have 2 copies of this card. If I had a third, I would be playing it, and I'll probably pick up one soon. This is the only one I would max out on just because this is definitely the card that I want to make sure doesn't get banished off Extravagance. Adding to it, we are playing 1 copy of White Aura Monoceros. Very similar to the Aura Whale, except it's a 7-star. Requiring a water tuner and non-tuner monsters. When this card is synchro summoned, you can target a fish monster in your graveyard and special summon it. That can bring back your Terra King Salmon, or if you've already gone into a card like White Aura Whale, you can bring that card back from the graveyard, which is pretty cool. And other than that, it's really only useful for also having the effect of if this card is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can banish a water monster and bring it back. It is treated as a tuner. These are nice resilient monsters to have. You can tag out what you want to protect with Sea Stealth Attack. Let these cards get killed. You'll just bring them right back. And that's what we like to see it. Next, I am playing 1 copy of Bahamut Shark. Everything on the field usually becomes a level 4 monster, so with 2 level 4 waters we can make Bahamut Shark, and of course detach a material. 2 summon are totally awesome. If I had more of these, I would consider upping the ratio, just because this is one of the most useful plays, and definitely don't want to, if I banish either of these off of Extravagance, the play is dead, but still worth having just in case. The rest of the extra deck is a lot of just some of my favorite rank 4s for going against my dueling group. We have a Baguska, which requires 2 level 4s. You summon it in defense. It acts as skill drain for 2 turns. Everything becomes in defense, and they can't activate their effects while they do so. Next up, we have 2 copies of Abyss Dweller. The nice thing is, since we'll be making this with water monsters, it gains the 500 attack, and of course we just detach a material so that your opponent can't use effects that activate in the graveyard. Graveyard effects quite common, so Abyss Dweller is quite a good anti-meta tool to have against it. Next, playing 1 copy of the Silent Honor Arc. You can detach 2 materials to select an attack position monster your opponent controls and equip it to this card. And of course, when it would be destroyed, you can detach a material instead. Pretty good effect, and it's a water monster, which is really nice. Allows us to have something to tag out for C stealth attack to protect our monsters. We can summon it under Goes and Match, etc. Next, I'm playing 2 copies of Tornado Dragon, level 4, that once per turn during either player's turn, you can detach a material to pop a spell or trap card. Definitely like that. Pretty good. Next, 2 copies of Castel, the Sky Blaster Musketeer. Of course, we mostly use this for its effects to detach 2 materials from it, to shuffle a card on the field into the deck. Something we need to spin, get rid of. Castel. Next, 1 copy of Ragna Zero, another just decent water XZ that I can summon under Goes and Match, 2,400 attack, and once per turn during either player's turn, detach a material to target a monster your opponent controls. That's face-up attack. That attack is not equal to its original attack, and you can destroy it. And then, of course, if you do, draw a card. Pretty sweet. And last, to round out the extra deck, playing 1 copy of Gaga Cowboy. I oftentimes find myself just needing a little extra 800 damage to end a game. I can go into Cowboy, get that 800 damage by detaching a material. Pretty sweet. And that is it for my extra deck. Now that we're through the card by card, there's a couple cards that I kind of wanted to talk about, so I figured I'd add that at the end of this video. Just other cards that I've on and off played in this Legendary Ocean style deck. It's a deck that, I can change up quite a bit to adapt to whatever I'm going up against, whatever I'm seeing everyone play at Duel Night. So we'll start by talking about Card of Demise. Sometimes, we can lower the monster count even more, get rid of the Fisherman 3, and go all in on the stun deck route, and Card of Demise is pretty great for that. You draw cards until you have 3 in your hand. So if you're playing a back row heavy deck, Card of Demise is a great payoff to that kind of build around, and Legendary Ocean works pretty well for that. You have a field spell, you'll summon a monster, then you have lots of spell and trap cards that are pretty hard to deal with for an opponent. So, being able to get such free card advantage on a turn we're not Extravagance playing is pretty sweet. So, definitely like Card of Demise. It goes in sometimes. And sometimes when I'm not, sometimes I opt to play out of a Pot of Extravagance type style, and I'll go in for a little more focus on the extra deck. And when I do that, Instant Fusion is really big in this deck. And I have 2 targets that I'm normally summoning off of Instant Fusion. Either Deep Sea Shark if I don't need a tuner, or if I needed a tuner, Sea Monster of Theseus. Both of these are great. They're level 5 water monsters, so they work with Sea Stealth Attack. If you're worried about them, you can just summon them with Instant Fusion and tag them out with Sea Stealth Attack if you want them for a later turn. Want them to avoid the destruction. And so, pretty awesome cards to have. Gives you another way to get into White Aura Whale or to make one of your XZ's plays. So if I cut the Extravagance and, go in for more extra deck plays, Instant Fusion is definitely something that's great to have. And that new Ready Fusion that came out, I'll have my eyes on it because it would also work for these cards. And just kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about is sometimes the monster count can still be a little cloggy. Um, Probably the best method is to go all in on the stun deck, and sometimes you can do that by just focusing more on these vanillas, like the Terra King Salmon and the Go Giga Gaga Gigo. You know, play 3 or 4 copies of them, and then go in on the Summoner's Art. Summoner's Art is essentially any of those cards because it searches a level 5 or higher monster. So you can play a really low monster count and go really all in on the Card of Demise, Floodgates, stun your opponent out of the game strategy. In general, I think that is the most effective way to play this deck and just get wins, just because, you know, the built-in deck plays are just not as powerful as basically locking your opponent out of the game with a good Floodgate. So definitely an important thing to decide on doing. And of course, sometimes you can keep extravagance in and go more in on the Legendary Fisherman 3, play extra copies of it, get a, you know, powerful boss monster that's hard to deal with, banishing your opponent's stuff. It's a lot of fun. And of course, when you do that, you might want to consider running a copy or two of the original Legendary Fisherman just to have more fishermen available to tribute for the Legendary Fisherman 3 summon. So that's a couple extra things I wanted to talk about with this deck. Just a number of different things you can do with it, a number of different ways to play. Very fun. I'm very glad to just have all those tools. All the variety of options makes it a really fun deck to revisit and adapt to, you know, different scenes of play. Well, all right. I think that is everything I had to say about Legendary Ocean in this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Definitely a deck I'm a huge fan of. Will always be a Legendary fan loyalist. I'm looking to make a even more fun, silly, casual build that will use the traditional Lapis Dragon Daedalus, one of my favorite old iconic monsters. So that'll be fun to look into, and we might see that up on the future as soon as I figure out how that works. So let me know if you like Legendary Ocean 2. I'd be interested to hear what you do with the card if you're playing it, what things you like about it. You know, drop all that below, and I will catch you all next time. Later!